Yesterday we were relieved, and now our bellies are full of beef and haricot beans. We are satisfied and at peace. Each man has another mess tin full for the evening, and what is more, there is a double ration of sausage and bread. That puts a man in fine trim. We have not had such luck as this for a long time. The cook with his carroty head is begging us to eat. He beckons with his ladle to everyone that passes and spoons him out a great dollop. He does not see how he can empty his stew pot in time for coffee. Tjaden and Müller have produced 2 wash basins and had them filled up to the brim as a reserve. In Tjaden, this is veracity. In Müller, it is foresight. Where Tjaden puts it all is a mystery, for he is and always will be as thin as a rake. What's more important still is the issue of a double ration of smokes. 10 cigars, 20 cigarettes, and 2 quids of chew per man. Now that is decent. I have exchanged my chewing tobacco with Kaczynski for his cigarettes, which means I have 40 altogether. That's enough for a day. It is true we have no right to this windfall. The Prussian is not so generous. We have only a miscalculation to thank for it. 14 days ago, we had to go up and relieve the front line. It was fairly quiet on our sector, so the quartermaster who remained in the rear had requisitioned the usual quantity of rations and provided for the full company of 150 men. But on the last day, an astonishing number of English heavies opened up on us with high explosive, drumming ceaselessly in our position, so that we suffered severely and came back only 80 strong. Last night we moved back and settled down to get a good sleep for once. Kaczynski is right when he says it would not be such a bad war if one could only get a little more sleep. In the line we have had next to none, and 14 days is a long time at one stretch. It was noon before the first of us crawled out of our quarters. Half an hour later every man had his mess tin, and we gathered at the cookhouse, which smelt greasy and nourishing. At the head of the queue, of course, were the hungriest. Little Albert Krupp, the clearest thinker among us, and therefore only a lance corporal. Müller, who still carries his school textbooks with him, dreams of examinations, and during a bombardment mutters propositions in physics. Lehr, who wears a full beard and has a preference for the girls from officers' brothels. He swears that they are obliged by an army order to wear silk chemises and to bathe before entertaining guests of the rank of captain and upwards. And as the fourth, myself, Paul Bäumer. All 4 are 19 years of age, and all 4 joined up from the same class as volunteers for the war. Close behind us were our friends. Tjaden, the skinny locksmith of our own age, the biggest eater of the company. He sits down to eat, as thin as a grasshopper, and gets up as big as a bug in the family way. Haie Westhus, of the same age, a peat digger, who can easily hold a ration loaf in his hand and say, "Guess what I've got in my fist." Then Datering, a peasant who thinks of nothing but his farmyard and his wife. And finally Stanislaus Kaczynski, the leader of our group, shrewd, cunning, and hard-bitten, 40 years of age, with a face of the soil, blue eyes, bent shoulders, and a remarkable nose for dirty weather, good food, and soft jobs. Our gang formed the head of the queue before the cookhouse. We were growing impatient, for the cook paid no attention to us. Finally, Kaczynski called to him, "Say, Heinrich, open up the soup kitchen. Anyone can see the beans are done." He shook his head sleepily. "You must all be there first." Tjaden grinned. "We are all here." The sergeant cook still took no notice. "That may do for you," he said, "but where are the others?" "They won't be fed by you today. They're either in the dressing station or pushing up daisies." The cook was quite disconcerted as the facts dawned on him. He was staggered. "I've cooked for 150 men." Krupp poked him in the ribs. "Then for once we'll have enough. Come on, begin." Suddenly a vision came over Tjaden. His sharp, mousy features began to shine. His eyes grew small with cunning. His jaws twitched, and he whispered hoarsely, "Man, then you've got enough bread for 150 men too, huh?" The sergeant cook nodded, absent-minded and bewildered. Tjaden seized him by the tunic. And sausage? Ginger nodded again. Tjaden's chaps quivered. Tobacco too? Yes, everything. Tjaden beamed. What a bean feast! That's all for us. Each man gets... Wait a bit. Yes, practically 2 issues. Then Ginger stirred himself and said, That won't do. We got excited and began to crowd around. Why won't that do, you old carrot? Demanded Kaczynski. 80 men can't have what is meant for 150. We'll soon show you, growled Müller. Well, I don't care about the stew, but I can only issue rations for 80 men, persisted Ginger. Kaczynski got angry. You might be generous for once. You haven't drawn food for 80 men, you've drawn it for the second company. Good. Let's have it then. We are the second company. We began to jostle the fellow. No one felt kindly toward him, for it was his fault that the food often came up to us in the line too late and cold. Under shell fire, he wouldn't bring his kitchen up near enough, so that our soup carriers had to go much farther than those of the other companies. Now Bulka of the first company is a much better fellow. He is as fat as a hamster in winter, but he trundles his pots when it comes to that right up to the very front line. We were in just the right mood, and there would certainly have been a dust-up if our company commander had not appeared. He informed himself of the dispute and only remarked, Yes, we did have heavy losses yesterday. He glanced into the Dixie. The beans looked good. Ginger nodded. Cooked with meat and fat. The lieutenant looked at us. He knew what we were thinking. Then passing on, he said, Bring me a plateful. Serve out all the rations. We can do with them. Suddenly the nearer explosions cease. The shelling continues, but it has lifted and falls behind us. Our trench is free. We seize the hand grenades, pitch them out in front of the dugout, and jump after them. The bombardment has stopped, and a heavy barrage now falls behind us. The attack has come. No one would believe that in this howling waste there could still be men, but steel helmets now appear on all sides out of the trench, and 50 yards from us a machine gun is already in position and barking. The wire entanglements are torn to pieces, yet they offer some obstacle. We see the storm troops coming. Our artillery opens fire. Machine guns rattle, rifles crack. The charge works its way across. Haya and Kropp begin with the hand grenades. They throw as fast as they can. Others pass them, the handles with the strings already pulled. Haya throws 75 yards, Kropp 60. It has been measured. The distance is important. The enemy, as they run, cannot do much before they are within 40 yards. We recognize the smooth, distorted faces, the helmets. They are French. They have already suffered heavily when they reach the remnants of the barbed wire entanglements. The whole line has gone down before our machine guns. Then we have a lot of stoppages, and they come nearer. I see one of them, his face upturned, fall into a wire cradle. His body collapses. His hands remain suspended as though he were praying. Then his body drops clean away, and only his hands with the stumps of his arms shot off now hang in the wire. The moment we are about to retreat, 3 faces rise up from the ground in front of us. Under one of the helmets a dark pointed beard and 2 eyes that are fastened on me. I raise my hand, but I cannot throw into those strange eyes. For one mad moment the whole slaughter whirls like a circus around me, and these 2 eyes alone are motionless. Then the head rises up, a hand, a movement, and my hand grenade flies through the air and into him. We make for the rear, pull wire cradles into the trench, and leave bombs behind us with the strings pulled, which ensures us a fiery retreat. The machine guns are already firing from the next position. We have become wild beasts. We do not fight, we defend ourselves against annihilation. It is not against men that we fling our bombs. What do we know of men in this moment, when death is hunting us down? Now, for the first time in 3 days, we can see his face. Now, for the first time in 3 days, we can oppose him. We feel a mad anger. No longer do we lie helpless, waiting on the scaffold. We can destroy and kill to save ourselves and to be revenged. We crouch behind every corner. behind every barrier of barbed wire, and hurl heaps of explosives at the feet of the advancing enemy before we run. The blast of the hand grenades impinges powerfully on our arms and legs. Crouching like cats, we run on, overwhelmed by this wave that bears us along, that fills us with ferocity, turns us into thugs, into murderers, into God only knows what devils. This wave that multiplies our strength with fear and madness and greed of life, seeking and fighting for nothing but our deliverance. If your own father came over with them, you would not hesitate to fling a bomb at him. The forward trenches have been abandoned. Are they still trenches? They are blown to pieces, annihilated. There are only broken bits of trenches, holes linked by cracks, nests of craters, that is all. But the enemy's casualties increase. They did not count on so much resistance. It is nearly noon. The sun blazes hotly. The sweat stings in our eyes. We wipe it off on our sleeves, and often blood with it. At last we reach a trench that is in a somewhat better condition. It is manned and ready for the counterattack. It receives us. Our guns open in full blast and cut off the enemy attack. The lines behind us stop. They can advance no farther. The attack is crushed by our artillery. We watch. The fire lifts 100 yards, and we break forward. Beside me, a lance corporal has his head torn off. He runs a few steps more, while the blood spouts from his neck like a fountain. It does not come quite to hand fighting. They are driven back. We arrive once again at our shattered trench and pass on beyond. Oh, this turning back again. We reach the shelter of the reserves and yearn to creep in and disappear, but instead we must turn round and plunge again into the horror. If we were not automata at that moment, we would continue lying there, exhausted and without will. But we are swept forward again, powerless, madly savage and raging. We will kill, for they are still our mortal enemies. Their rifles and bombs are aimed against us, and if we don't destroy them, they will destroy us. The brown earth, the torn, blasted earth, with a greasy shine under the sun's rays. The earth is the background of this restless, gloomy world of automatons. Our gasping is the scratching of a quill. Our lips are dry. Our heads are debauched with stupor. Thus we stagger forward, and into our pierced and shattered souls bores the torturing image of the brown earth with the greasy sun, and the convulsed and dead soldiers who lie there, it can't be helped, who cry and clutch at our legs as we spring away over them. We have lost all feeling for one another. We can hardly control ourselves when our glance lights on the form of some other man. We are insensible, dead men who, through some trick, some dreadful magic, are still able to run and to kill. A young Frenchman lags behind. He is overtaken. He puts up his hands. In one he still holds his revolver. Does he mean to shoot or to give himself? A blow from a spade cleaves through his face. A second sees it and tries to run farther. A bayonet jabs into his back. He leaps in the air, his arms thrown wide, his mouth wide open, yelling. He staggers. In his back the bayonet quivers. A third throws away his rifle, cowers down with his hands before his eyes. He is left behind with a few other prisoners to carry off the wounded. Suddenly in the pursuit we reach the enemy line. We are so close on the heels of our retreating enemies that we reach it almost at the same time as they. In this way we suffer few casualties. A machine gun barks but is silenced with a bomb. Nevertheless, the couple of seconds has sufficed to give us 5 stomach wounds. With the butt of his rifle, Cat smashes to pulp the face of one of the unwounded machine gunners. We bayonet the others before they have time to get out their bombs. Then thirstily we drink the water they have for cooling the gun. Everywhere wire cutters are snapping, planks are thrown across the entanglements. We jump through the narrow entrances into the trenches. Hayes strikes his spade into the neck of a gigantic Frenchman and throws the first hand grenade. We duck behind a breastwork for a few seconds, then the straight bit of trench ahead of us is empty. The next throw whizzes obliquely over the corner and clears a passage. As we run past, we toss handfuls down into the dugouts. The earth shudders. It crashes, smokes, and groans. We stumble over slippery lumps of flesh, over yielding bodies. I fall into an open belly on which lies a clean new officer's cap. The fight ceases. We lose touch with the enemy. We cannot stay here long, but must retire under cover of our artillery to our own position. No sooner do we know this than we dive into the nearest dugouts and with the utmost haste seize on whatever provisions we can see, especially the tins of corned beef and butter, before we clear out. We get back pretty well. There is no further attack by the enemy. We lie for an hour, panting and resting, before anyone speaks. We are so completely played out that in spite of our great hunger we do not think of the provisions. Then gradually we become something like men again. The corned beef over there is famous along the whole front. Occasionally it has been the chief reason for a flying raid on our part, for our nourishment is generally very bad. We have a constant hunger. We bagged 5 tins altogether. The fellows over there are well looked after. They fare magnificently, as against us, poor starving wretches with our turnip jam. They can get all the meat they want. Haya has scored a thin loaf of white French bread and stuck it behind his belt like a spade. It is a bit bloody at one corner, but that can be cut off. It is a good thing we have something decent to eat at last. We still have a use for all our strength. Enough to eat is just as valuable as a good dugout. It can save our lives. That is the reason we are so greedy for it. Tjaden has captured 2 water bottles full of cognac. We pass them round. The evening benediction begins. Night comes. Out of the craters rise the mists. It looks as though the holes were full of ghostly secrets. The white vapor creeps painfully round before it ventures to steal away over the edge. Then long streaks stretch from crater to crater. It is chilly. I am on sentry and stare into the darkness. My strength is exhausted as always after an attack, and so it is hard for me to be alone with my thoughts. They are not properly thoughts. They are memories which in my weakness haunt me and strangely move me. The parachute lights soar upwards, and I see a picture, a summer evening. I am in the cathedral cloister, and look at the tall rose trees that bloom in the middle of the little cloister garden where the monks lie buried. Around the walls are the stone carvings of the Stations of the Cross. No one is there. A great quietness rules in this blossoming quadrangle. The sun lies warm on the heavy grey stones. I place my hand upon them and feel the warmth. At the right-hand corner, the green cathedral spire ascends into the pale blue sky of the evening. Between the glowing columns of the cloister is the cool darkness that only churches have, and I stand there and wonder whether when I am 20 I shall have experienced the bewildering emotions of love. The image is alarmingly near. It touches me before it dissolves in the light of the next star shell. I lay hold of my rifle to see that it is in trim. The barrel is wet. I take it in my hands and rub off the moisture with my fingers. Between the meadows behind our town there stands a line of old poplars by a stream. They were visible from a great distance, and although they grew on one bank only, we called them the Poplar Avenue. Even as children we had a great love for them. They drew us vaguely thither. We played truant the whole day by them, and listening to their rustling. We sat beneath them on the bank of the stream and let our feet hang in the bright, swift waters. The pure fragrance of the water and the melody of the wind in the poplars held our fancy. We loved them dearly, and the image of those days still makes my heart pause in its beating. It is strange that all the memories that come have these two qualities. They are always completely calm, that is predominant in them, and even if they are not really calm, they become so. They are soundless apparitions that speak to me, with looks and gestures, silently, without any word. And it is the alarm of their silence that forces me to lay hold of my sleeve and my rifle, lest I should abandon myself to the liberation and allurement in which my body would dilate, and gently pass away into the still forces that lie behind these things. They are quiet in this way, because quietness is so unattainable for us now. At the front there is no quietness, and the curse of the front reaches so far that we never pass beyond it. Even in the remote depots and rest areas, the droning and the muffled noise of shelling is always in our ears. We are never so far off that it is no more to be heard. But these last few days it has been unbearable. Their stillness is the reason why these memories of former times do not awaken desire so much as sorrow. A vast, inapprehensible melancholy. Once we had such desires, but they return not. They are past. They belong to another world that is gone from us. In the barracks they called forth a rebellious, wild craving for their return, for then they were still bound to us. We belonged to them and they to us, even though we were already absent from them. They appeared in the soldiers' songs which we sang as we marched between the glow of the dawn and the black silhouettes of the forests to drill on the moor. They were a powerful remembrance that was in us and came from us. But here in the trenches they are completely lost to us. They arise no more. We are dead and they stand remote on the horizon. They are a mysterious reflection, an apparition that haunts us, that we fear and love without hope. They are strong and our desire is strong, but they are unattainable and we know it. And even if these scenes of our youth were given back to us, we would hardly know what to do. The tender, secret influence that passed from them into us could not rise again. We might be amongst them and move in them, we might remember and love them and be stirred by the sight of them, but it would be like gazing at the photograph of a dead comrade. Those are his features, it is his face, and the days we spent together take on a mournful life in the memory. But the man himself, it is not. We could never regain the old intimacy with those scenes. There was not any recognition of their beauty and their significance that attracted us, but the communion, the feeling of a comradeship with the things and events of our existence, which cut us off and made the world of our parents a thing incomprehensible to us. For then we surrendered ourselves to events and were lost in them, and the least little thing was enough to carry us down the stream of eternity. Perhaps it was only the privilege of our youth, but as yet we recognized no limits and saw nowhere an end. We had that thrill of expectation in the blood which united us with the course of our days. Today we would pass through the scenes of our youth like travelers. We are burnt up by hard facts. Like tradesmen we understand distinctions and like butchers' necessities. We are no longer untroubled. We are indifferent. We might exist there, but should we really live there? We are forlorn like children and experienced like old men. We are crude and sorrowful and superficial. I believe we are lost. My hands grow cold and my flesh creeps, and yet the night is warm. Only the mist is cold, this mysterious mist that trails over the dead and sucks from them their last creeping life. By morning they will be pale and green and their blood congealed and black. Still the parachute rockets shoot up and cast their pitiless light over the stony landscape, which is full of craters and frozen lights like a moon. The blood beneath my skin brings fear and restlessness into my thoughts. They become feeble and tremble. They want warmth and life. They cannot persist without solace, without illusion. They are disordered before the naked picture of despair. I hear the rattle of the mess tins and immediately feel a strong desire for warm food. It would do me good and comfort me. Painfully I force myself to wait until I am relieved. Then I go into the dugout and find a mug of barley. It is cooked in fat and tastes good. I eat it, slowly. I remain quiet, though the others are in a better mood, for the shelling has died down. The days go by, and the incredible hours follow one another as a matter of course. Attacks alternate with counterattacks, and slowly the dead pile up in the field of craters between the trenches. We are able to bring in most of the wounded that do not lie too far off, but many have long to wait, and we listen to them dying. For one of them we search 2 days in vain. He must be lying on his belly and unable to turn over. Otherwise it is hard to understand why we cannot find him, for it is only when a man has his mouth close to the ground that it is impossible to gauge the direction of his cry. He must have been badly hit.